Hello everyone, welcome to the Rec Hangout, hashtag Rec Hangout. Thank you for joining us. This week's title is How to be a Successful Leader, Recruitment Reinvented, Leading for Fun and Money. I'm very glad to say we've been joined by Greg Savage, which is 10 p.m. in Australia at the moment. Thanks for joining us, Greg, and James Osborne from the Elite Partnership Network. I'm going to ask them to, Elite Recruitment Network, sorry. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a minute and let Alan introduce the topic. This Hangout is a bit of a sort of preamble to a couple of masterclasses that Greg is carrying out in London, sponsored and supported by the Elite Recruitment Network, on the 10th of September. So I'll ask Greg to talk a bit more about that, but there's one called The Modern Recruiter, Evolved, Retooled and Rebooted. That's the morning session on the 10th of September, and one called The Recruitment Reinvented, Leading for Fun and Money, directed at owners and managers. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you have any questions, please use the hashtag on Twitter. That's hashtag RecHangout. I'll direct them to Alan to ask. And if you want to ask on Google+, use the Q&A app. Thank you very much. Alan, I'll hand over to yourself.
Thanks a lot, Louis, Greg, James, welcome. Good evening in Australia, Greg. Hope you're hanging in there, and it's been a productive day for you.
Thank you, Alan. It's been
very good. Sorry. Good. And even more productive now, isn't it? Now that you're going to get to share this knowledge in a pre-game session, as we like to call it. And James, you're inviting Greg to come and talk to your network then, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've got Greg coming over in September, getting here September on the 10th, to talk to some of our members and some of the other people that we work with in the recruitment sector. So we're very excited about that.
Mm-hmm. So James, why don't we just start just what exactly is the Elite Recruitment Network? What does that actually do?
Yeah, sure. Well, we work with about 400 or 500 recruitment organizations. At the crux of what we do is around our Elite Leader offering, which in essence is a peer-to-peer networking sort of club, like an exclusive private members club, I suppose, for recruitment company owners and senior managers. They get together each month in groups, and we share best practice, challenge each other's thinking about how we're doing things. The main focus is to ensure that our members have a significant competitive edge in the marketplace and they outperform the market, which is what they're currently doing at the moment. So it's really about providing them the nutrients to grow and really sort of, capitalize on what the market's doing at the moment, which is quite exciting.
Fantastic. It sounds well like we all should be signing up to that. And Greg, many of our listeners may have heard us back in the days of Blog Talk Radio and the pre-True London days, but if they don't know anything about you, well, they obviously have their head in the sand, but for those of those who don't really know what Greg Savage is, other than possibly the Savage Truth, what does Greg actually do?
Well, I prefer to talk about what I used to do than what I currently do, Alan, because that's far more impressive. But I've been a recruiter for 35 years, and very brief highlights would include starting a company in the late 80s and taking it to a listing on the stock exchange in Australia with 2 other guys. That was a big success and a lot of fun. And then leading Aquint, which is a marketing and design company, as the international CEO, opening offices across the world. That was a lot of fun. And then most recently with Firebrand, a company that was recently sold. But now what I do is act as an advisor to recruitment companies. I'm on the board of 10, which keeps me very busy. And actually, this is probably the most pertinent thing, I would truthfully say I've learned as much in the last 18 months doing that as I did in the last 10 years. Because it's allowed me into the tent, so to speak, to see how other companies operate. And to see the good and the bad, pick up tips, see mistakes people are making, and that's what I spent a lot of my time doing, as well as some speaking engagements. Not a lot, but this one in London is going to be very, very interesting because the market there is picking up, and I see massive opportunity, but I also see that many people will be passed over as the market picks up because they'll do the wrong things and they won't make the right decisions, and that's really what we're going to talk a lot about in London in the manager session.
And I think that's a lot of what we want to cover today, guys. You said, Greg, you've been on the board. You are on the board of about 10 companies. James, you've been involved in direct with your own business, and then obviously what you're doing with the leaders. And I guess one of the first things what might be obvious question is, what are the big mistakes that you're seeing? You know, the 5 top sort of gotchas. Like, man, you're really making a mess out of this thing. And then more importantly is how should the recruitment leader, the business leader, actually avoid those pieces? And we're going to cover some topics around the people management side, maybe obviously pay and reward, or team structure, or even getting the right staff, or getting the right client. So I think there's quite a few things we probably want to touch on here. And maybe the first one might be, because I know, Greg, I've seen you write about it quite a lot in the past, or talk about it, is about attitude, business owner attitude. What do you mean by that, and how do we actually fix that?
Yeah, it's hard to put your arms around it, but I'll try. I'll try and explain what I mean by that. Really, I'm talking about the paradigm, the belief system of owners of recruitment companies. And as I said just a moment ago, I'm seeing this close hand. And so, for example, there are a lot of recruiters, a lot of owners of recruitment companies who believe that what we've been through in the last sort of 5 years is simply part of a normal economic cycle. So in other words, yes, we had a recession in the UK, we had a downturn in other parts of the world. Now it's going to pick up and everything will be the same as it was before. And that is a big mistake. Not everybody is going to rise on the tide. And in my research for the UK, which, as I said, I'm going to in a while, it is very stark. Everyone's talking about how the market's picked up there, but let me tell you, there are recruitment companies in the UK struggling. There are recruitment companies losing money in the UK. There are also recruitment companies making a lot of money. Now, how has that come about? And I think it's to do with the attitude, well, not only, but it's largely to do with the attitude and the belief of the owner. So, for example, some of the things that are obvious, we can do the same type of business development that we've always done. You know, we've got to get our guys to make a lot of phone calls. We did that in the 80s. We did that in the 90s. We did that in the last 10 years. It'll work. It won't work. Social media, it's a fad. It's not important. These are some of the attitudinal issues that are undermining people's ability to thrive, and I actually will go as far as to say as will send some people bust. And a major one, before I hand over to maybe to James, is the misunderstanding about our consumer. And what I mean by that is that the client's attitudes have changed, not incrementally, but seismically. They want something different from our industry. They will only pay us for things for certain things, and typically they are candidates they can't find themselves. And also, there is a lack of understanding, I believe, that the future of our industry is all about access to candidates. And there are so few companies really investing in tactics and strategies and processes that are going to give them access to candidates that their competitors, and most importantly, their clients can't find. They're still, you know, they're doing a few things, Twitter stream and, you know, job boards, but anyone can do that. We need something more sophisticated. And it all comes from the leadership, or if you like, the lack of leadership. So that's what I mean about the attitude. I think that is really holding some companies back and will lead to some significant negative outcomes for some organizations across the world.
James, do you see that with the folks that are coming to your events and that are actually have joined your network? Is, you know, are you seeing that we've got to do some attitude change, or just by definition of them joining up with you, have they already flicked that switch?
Well, I mean, I like to think that we're helping them flick that switch. I think Greg's absolutely right. I think this attitude thing is critical. And the way we said, I see the markets have changed. Recruitment is very, very different from how it used to be 5, 10, 15 years ago. And I think what I'm really seeing now are 3 types of, I suppose, leadership in recruitment organizations. We get some who are embracing that change, who are getting it, understanding it, embracing technologies and social media, all that stuff that Greg talks about, which I absolutely fervently agree with. We're getting some leaders who are staying the same and thinking that's okay and carrying on doing the same, but they're not getting the same results they used to get because the markets have evolved and changed, and that's not working. And then you get this third sort of group of leaders who seem to be panicking and who really don't seem to be knowing what they're doing. And either they're trying to change but not really changing in the right way. A classic example would be, you know, a lot of people we talk to, especially on the sales side, looking at their sales strategy, are trying to identify what their unique selling point should be and what their sort of brand differentiators are going to be in the marketplace, how they can be that so-called purple cow, as Seth Godin would call it, in the market. And the USPs that people are producing just seem to be very flaky, very sort of regurgitated sort of sales garbage, I think, that we've heard time and time again for years and years. To me, the most poignant USP that a recruitment organization could have, in fact, any service-led industry could have, is the physical and very tangible return on investment that they're providing to their customer base. And I think that's a really, really important part of this. So I think the attitude is right. I think we need to focus on, and Greg used the right word, which gets bantered around all the time, but never really utilized as it should do, which is strategy, and putting some real strategic thinking into what the markets are doing, how customer buying processes have changed, how candidate acquisition has changed, and putting strategies around that, and then evolving those strategies down through the business. A classic example of this would be, I see a lot of recruitment company owners who panic when they walk around their recruitment floors and it's deathly quiet. And they're going, well, why aren't people on the telephone selling? Well, actually, they might be on social media doing an even better job of candidate acquisition and penetrating deep into some of these social media software. So I think we need to change those attitudes, absolutely right, but I think we need to change in a strategic way rather than a panicky sort of way.
Well, what it sounds to me like, guys, is what we're talking about. The first and foremost challenge that we have, if we are going to be successful, if we're going to build this new business for the new millennium or whatever we want to call whatever we're in now, is if you haven't found and hired the right people to begin with, you're pretty much behind the 8 ball, aren't you?
Well, yeah,
Greg. I mean, how do you define and find the right people then?
Well, I reckon that we've got to talk at some length about this because we all know that one of the biggest ironies in our industry is that we are not very good at hiring people at the best of times. Our staff turnover is outrageously high, and the reason our staff turnover is high is because we hire the wrong sorts of people and we don't invest in training them, and we're not very good at any retention strategies. But to add to that, Alan, is the fact that it's my belief that we need to hire a different style of recruiter than we've ever hired before. And again, this plays into the attitude thing. It plays into the looking back. I see people hiring dinosaur recruiters, and I know that that is a very harsh term, and of course the individuals themselves might be very nice people, but their skill set and their mindset is backward looking. And I see people hiring them, and I can predict their failure. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about people who, recruiters I should say, who hide behind the technology. I mean, what James has mentioned is exactly right. We need to be digital natives. We need to hire digital natives, but we don't want people to hide behind technology either and avoid the selling, and not so much the selling as the influencing. My view is that recruitment is about top technology where it blends with highly evolved human skills. And if you believe that, and you should because it's right, then you need to hire people who have the ability or at least the potential to be highly skilled using technology, and by that I mean, yes, social media, yes, engaging with people, Google searching, using LinkedIn properly, which most recruiters can't. So there's the technology, but there's the highly evolved human skills, such as, I predict right now for all your listeners, and I hope there is somebody listening to this, that if you're in recruitment in England or Australia, here's my prediction. You are going to face counter-offers like you've never had before. Every placement you make is going to be subject to a counter-offer. How do I know? It's obvious, because there's massive skill shortages, and candidates are going to get counter-offers from their employers, I should say. So what this means is we need to hire a different style of person. Don't hire the spray and pray type of recruiter, no initiative, social media kind of phobic, resistant to change, spraying resumes around. That is absolutely not going to work. Even if those people have got a track record of billing in the past, my prediction is that they will become increasingly ineffective. So the first thing is we've got to understand that we need to hire people with a different skill set, and those skill sets are I like to use the word digital native, which suggests that they've been brought up in a digital environment, but you can become a reborn digital native like me. I've learnt how to use social media, even though I'm 56 years old. And so it's not about age. It's not about generation. Most of that stuff about generation is total bullshit. Total bullshit. Don't believe any of that. It's attitude. And not only that, you need to hire people who've got deep networks. because it's being deep in a niche that counts, and it's people who are the ability and the understanding can build their personal brands. And by the way, that's a major challenge for recruitment companies, which a lot of guys, a lot of women running recruitment companies can't get their head around. We actually have to promote the building of individual brands within the corporate brand. And that scares us because they're going to go away with their brand. But here's the bad news. They're going to do it anyway. They're going to do it anyway if they're any good. They will build their brand, and what you've got to do is harness it for your organization. So these are some of the things I'd look for. I'd look for people who are empathetic. You might found that a strange word for me to use for a recruiter, but we need that because it's all going to be about candidates, it's all going to be about referrals, and it's going to be a changed world. And I'd look for people who understand the craft of recruitment. Technology is critical, but so is influencing human behavior. Take, for an example, I mean, you know, I've got a son 2 bedrooms away, he's 13. He could find anything on the internet. Trust me, he could find any candidate on the internet. Some of the stuff he finds on the internet you don't want to look at. He can find it. But so he's a digital native, and we could teach him how to use LinkedIn, and he'd be better than anyone on this call. But could he pick up the phone and, having found that candidate on the internet, and encourage them to meet for a coffee? Could he introduce that person to it? Could he handle a counteroffer? No, that's a highly involved craft of recruitment skill. And these are the things we should hire. So circling back to your question, before I give poor old James a turn, circling back to your question, before we even start to discuss tactics to hire recruitment consultants, let's understand the beast it is that we're trying to find. And it's a different person. It might be the same human being, don't get me wrong, but it's a different skill set. It needs to be someone who's got with the program and evolved their skills for the new era. That's where I would start, Alan.
Well, and James, you're in the digital native generation, and I agree with Greg. Look, I'm the oldest Gen Y guy I know. You know, so like everybody, we've had to do this to survive. You know, there's not a lot of boomers that actually do this. I get frightened when I see one of these boomer TV shows coming up, and I'm going, "Geez, I hope I don't look that old." You know, but I think you're right. In recruitment, from the days that I wandered around Regent Street with a fistful of 2 Ps and and just called people, has changed a great deal. Yes, it's still sales, but it's a different kind of sales, isn't it, James? When you're trying to help these companies take the next step, are you seeing the change from the dinosaur salesperson to someone different?
Well, absolutely, and I think Greg touched on this point earlier on. It's not really about selling; it's about influencing, and I think that's a key word that we need to look at. The buying process has changed significantly. We need to stop trying to beat people up into buying from us and hounding them. We need to enable them to be able to make a buying decision. That's a very different process, and a lot of that comes through sort of what I call touching up customers. So that goes through your marketing effort and through sort of really getting them to understand exactly who you are and how you do things, as opposed to sort of trying to beat them up. But the point about these types of people, I mean, if I sit on the board of 7 recruitment companies, and each one of those have a sort of a predicted growth plans, bottom left corner to top right corner over the next few years, which are significantly high, all of which are underpinned by finding the right talent. And there is a significant dearth of recruitment talent in the industry. I mean, I don't know, lots of different numbers are being bantered around about this. There were, I think it was something like sort of 100,000 recruiters working in the recruitment sector pre-recession. There's about 70,000 left in the UK currently working in the recruitment industry. So a lot of people have left the industry for all sorts of different reasons, maybe gone in-house or left the industry for good. So we're candidate short as an industry itself, just trying to find those right people. But when I advise my recruitment company clients, and when we talk to people at the Elite Leader meetings, I often challenge the perception that the type of people that we've always had in the past will still work. Now, we see a lot of 360 recruitments as 360 consultants as the model. I'm not a huge fan of that personally, and the main reason why I'm not a fan of that is I think the personality traits or the skills and attributes of somebody who is what I would call a truffle hunter, someone who's a very good recruiter, is actually, I think, quite different from somebody who's out there in front of customers trying to sort of open up doors and create opportunities. So I like to, wherever I can with my clients, try and separate the sort of the sales part of the business to the recruitment part of the business and keep them as 2 separate entities. I think that's quite an important thing to do. I also think as well, though, when you look at this sort of social media, there's so many tools out there that you could use. There's hundreds of different types of tools. And I think only people touch on maybe 1 or 2 at the most. I was with a client the other day, and this was quite interesting for me, actually, and I put myself on the spot a little bit, but I was working with a client having a board meeting, and we got chatting to one of their consultants who was trying to find a particular IT candidate for a contract role. And I asked them what they've been done so far to find someone. They couldn't find anybody, and what they had done. And they posted the job out on LinkedIn, done some tweeting and that type of stuff. And I said, well, how deep and dirty have you got with your social media to really try and uncover this truffle that you're trying to find and put a place with the candidate, with the clients? And I said to them, like, give me 5 minutes. I'm going to put myself on a bit of a spot here. I'm going to try and find you a candidate in 5 minutes, if that's okay. So I was risking my life and limb here a little bit. But I went onto Twitter and did a bit of deep searching on Twitter based on some sort of hashtag conversations that were going on. Kind of very long story short, we found 4 contractors in the space of about 4 minutes by following a couple of hashtags and following some events that were going on and looking at their network. The recruiter contacted or tried to contact all 4, couldn't get through to one. 2 of them they already knew, but the 4th person they actually managed to place that afternoon. Now, I'm not trying to be smart or clever, and actually, from my point of view, it was quite nice to get my hand back into a bit of recruitment again. But the interesting thing was, I made a little tiny bit more effort than that consultant had done in the first place to find that sort of truffle, and it was quite easy to do. I was quite lucky, potentially. But it just shows me that if we are going to go into this social media age and we are going to embrace this technology, then we really need to get into it and really properly get into it and not just touch the surface on it. So if we're going to use LinkedIn, let's use it properly for what it really is, which I think is a community networking portal as opposed to just an overrated job board. If we're going to use Twitter, let's get deep and dirty with it, and so forth through all the other social media technologies out there. And I think that needs a certain type of skill set. But again, going back to what we first talked about, it also needs a leadership team that would allow that to happen and embrace that to happen.
Well, we're not going to let our teams go off running around on those social media things. They're wasting their time, aren't they? I mean, this is the story we hear a lot, isn't it? You know, what are you doing on that stuff? Get back on the phone. You haven't done your 20 calls yet today. And I think there is a challenge in the leadership understanding that all of these tools, and look, I'm an old style communicator. They're just another ways to communicate. I used to have the computer use a yearbook that I would open up. That was my database. Well, we've got online databases now. The mentality of searching and finding people is a mentality, and I call it a search mentality. And I think that we really don't see a lot of that in recruiters today. There is that, as Greg said, you know, there's a lot of the post and pray people there. So to me, there's kind of a challenge, which is if most of those 70,000 recruiters are post and pray types, does that mean I shouldn't be trying to hire recruiters from other recruitment companies? Shouldn't I just be building my own? Shouldn't I be just going down there, getting a really bright engineering grad and train him or her up to be my engineering recruiter, or get a good finance grad and just start from scratch and build my own? You know, what do you think, Greg? Build your own, or can I find one from somebody else?
Well, you can do both, but in fact, I believe the answer to your question is yes, you should build your own. You should invest in it. You should take a longer-term view. But I'm going to come back to that question because I just want to address something that James said, which is he touched on something that's really, really important. He talked about 360 recruiters, and he talked about, I guess he was really driving at the fact that maybe one person can't have all the skills in one sort of cocktail. Can you get a person who's brilliant on the technology, loves deep diving into Twitter, who can also sell in a meeting and can also match and do everything else? And I think that the answer to that is maybe not. And maybe what we need to do is to understand that recruitment, the word we use, recruitment, is actually made up of at least 2, and probably more, but at least 2 very, very different functions. Candidate identification, in other words, finding someone, is a discrete skill. It's like I touched on my son example. Finding someone on the internet is a discrete skill. Recruiting them is a different skill. And selling is a third skill. And people seem to lump these all together and say, I've got a recruitment consultant, and we expect that recruitment consultant to have deep Boolean search skills, LinkedIn skills, deep internet search skills, finding social media skills, and we also expect them to have the ability to recruit those people, to actually get them to the hiring table, and that's another whole skill. And then we also say, by the way, would you mind going out and doing some cold calling and some selling and break some doors down? So what we did several years ago, and we sort of fumbled our way, I'm not saying we were thought leaders in this area, but we had people in our business called e-sources, and their job was talent identification. And my company was in 10 countries actually, and so we had people in Hong Kong and Singapore do it, because you can get a very bright graduate with 3 years experience in Singapore for $1,000 Australian a month. And that person would do the finding, the identifying. And then a different person would actually speak to the candidate, interview them, and take them through the process. Now, this was unsophisticated. It wasn't well thought through. We sort of fumbled on it. But it's the beginning of what I'm talking about, of just rethinking the way we run our businesses. Why would you think that you'd have one person who could be brilliant at the technology, brilliant at the craft of recruitment, and also, i.e. the influencing skills, and also be a full-on business developer? So we really need to think about that. But moving on to your question, in all the years I've been recruiting recruitment consultants, and that's a lot of years, on balance, I've had more success hiring people from outside the recruitment industry and training them than hiring big guns from other places. Of course, we've had success in all types. But on balance, even though it's a longer road, it's a higher risk, and it's a higher risk. They do tend to leave sometimes, obviously, when they find out recruitment's not for them. But if you do your due diligence, you end up with somebody trained in your likeness and malleable to understand the skills that you want them to have. And I think the obvious reason why we don't do enough of this in our industry is that our industry is totally woven with short-termism. We want results now. It's this month's numbers. It's this quarter's numbers. And trust me, I've owned recruitment businesses, and I've said those very words many, many times. But we've got to have a parallel thinking, which is we're going to invest. We're going to invest in people. We're going to invest in growing our own. Because as James has alluded to, there simply aren't enough good recruiters to go around. And in the UK, where the market's picking up, they can only get worse. So if you're going to hold out and hang out for some great recruiter to come across from somewhere else, normally they come across with one of two major problems. They're actually not as good as you think they are, and they don't work out. Or B, they cost you a fortune because you've had to buy them out from somewhere else. And often you get both those things together. So that's the doomsday scenario. So I would say we've got to invest and go and find, if we're recruiting in digital marketing, go and find a digital marketer who wants to jump onto our side of the fence. If you're recruiting in finance, maybe go and find a finance person who doesn't want to be a finance person anymore, and think about that. This is not new, but we've got to invest, because you won't get the returns as quickly as you would like, but you will usually often have somebody stay for much longer and over the long term deliver much more.
I think if I can just touch on that point, actually, because the other thing to think about is, if as a 360 consultant, if you are very good at truffle hunting and finding candidates, and you are good at selling, then guess what? You're probably at some point going to go and run your own recruitment business anyway. So I think you lose that ability to sort of maintain and retain staff, because the really good sales stroke consultants who are good 360s, generally, with that entrepreneurialism in them, will come out and they're going to go off and run their own business at some stage anyway. So a huge fan of building up, finding the raw attitudes, and that's what we're talking about here, is finding the raw attitudes and developing the skills to be able to do it. And I spend a lot of time running recruitment academies for our members and developing induction and training programs and that type of stuff. And if you think about the training piece, when you bring somebody on board, it's 75% of it is just how to do the job. We're teaching those hard skills. What we've got to go and recruit for is attitude, and that is the key to this, I think. And I think that's where it gets slightly flawed, because a lot of leaders, I think, still go back and try and find people who have got some of the hard skills. I don't care about the hard skills. I want people with the right attitudes in the first place, and that's what we look for more than anything else.
I couldn't agree with that more.
I think you're both, yeah.
Alan,
sorry, go ahead.
Just jump in. I couldn't agree with that more. It is tempting to try and pluck the juicy apple off the top of the tree, the person who's a big biller and from somewhere else. But how many times have I hired somebody for their resume and ultimately fired them for their attitude or their performance? God knows, many, many times. It's much better, I believe, to look for those core competencies that James is talking about. But we've got to identify what they are, and we need to understand how to assess them to make an informed decision. And those people won't build straight away. You're going to have to train, coach, mentor. But the end result is much better in the long run, I believe.
Well, definitely, and I've got a client who's located in the UK, and probably not the most obvious place where people go and look for work. It's by the beach, so quite a lot of people it's not quite Bondi Beach, Greg, but it's a UK beach, but everywhere's quite sort of relaxed. So it's quite hard to find talent there in the first place. And I said to them, what are you doing to try and find good recruiters? And they're saying, well, we've got jobs out and we're using Rec to Recs and that sort of stuff, which is all well and good and great, and I don't disagree with any of that. But I was saying, well, I came down last night and I stayed in a hotel before my board meeting with you guys today, and I went to a very nice bar, and the person behind the bar was probably one of the most gregarious, engaging, young people I've met in a long, long time. Absolutely fantastic. Customer service was wonderful. Couldn't do more. Continuously upselling things at the bar, which is normally quite easy for me anyway. But it was just a really good experience. And the first thing I said to those guys, go right now, leave the office right now, go down to that bar and go and find that person and go and ask them if they're interested in maybe coming to look at working in the recruitment sector. And that's the sort of thing you're looking for. Those people are out there. They're around us all the time. We just don't. We're looking past them for these hard skills, which is crazy.
I'm going to do a quick bit of reset for everybody. This is Alan Whitford. I'm with Greg Savage and James Osborne, and ably supported by Louis Welcomme from Colleague. This is Rec Hangout. We're actually talking today about Recruitment Reinvented, and it really feels a bit like that. We want to talk about how you're going to change your business or transform your business or actually make more of a success. We do have apologies from two of our normal cohorts in crime. Louise Triance, I think, is doing a picnic with her kids on holiday, and Mark Stevens, who's let a pesky client get in the way of actually joining us today, so that we could he could try and make some money. I guess we could all ascribe to that. Well, guys, the whole thing around the people and the attitude, it brings me to a question, and we've actually had a question come in from a couple of our viewers and listeners, but a question from Ruth Wendon now. Well, it sounds to me, how do we define the difference between leadership, because some of the stuff we're talking about should just be good management skills, but what's the difference between the management or the leadership piece? Because if we're going to make this transformational thing, if I'm going to sit back and say, hey, I'm actually know I'm going to hire a consultant who's probably not going to give me any money for 6 months, that feels like a leadership change to me rather than a management change. How do we define the two, Greg?
Well, I mean, leadership is how you impact people, and management is a word on your business card. That's the difference. Leadership is about having the ability to engineer change through bringing people with you on a journey. And I don't think that clearly not all managers are leaders, and you can learn leadership. Some people are more naturally leaders than others. But to really be a leader, you have to first of all have people's trust. You have to believe, and what they really need to believe, funny enough, is not that you've got a great vision for the company. That's important, but that you have a vision for them. That's what I've learned. That if you want to lead people, they have to believe that you have their best interests at heart. Even if you give them a hard time, set them hard targets, and sometimes give them a kick in the backside, as long as they believe that you're ultimately interested in their development within the organization, then that's the absolute platform to leadership. Then they'll believe the direction you're setting and will work with you. And of course, it's about leadership. It's about having leadership's about courage. Leadership's about seeing things that need to be done before the rest see it needed. I mean, the sleepless nights I've had in recruitment is about leadership, not about the job or the money. It's about, is this the right decision? Everyone tells me it's wrong, but I think we should go this way. Sometimes I've been wrong, but often, you make the decision that is clear or is perhaps right when others think it's not. That's leadership, and then bringing people with you on that journey. And yeah, I think that person who asked that question has actually struck to the core of the challenge. Many companies lack leadership, and I don't offer that up as a criticism to be unfair. I mean, most recruitment companies in the world, this is true. In Australia, the figure is 80%, have less than 10 staff. And what that means is they've been started by entrepreneurial recruiters who've gone out on their own, worked hard, had some relationships, but have never had the leadership skills, never been developed, to take their business beyond 10 to 15 people. That's why most recruitment companies in the world only have 10 to 15 people at maximum. It's lack of leadership and management, but mostly lack of leadership. And so she's absolutely right, I think, who asked that question. That's what I was talking about, attitude and all the rest of it. That's leadership. It's being able to change your paradigm and say, we've got to go this way. And right now, our industry, I'll be honest with you, I reckon the challenges facing our industry are more severe than anything I've seen in 35 years in this business. Seriously, I've been doing this since 1980. And that includes the arrival of the internet and recessions and everything else. Not that I think our industry is going to be wiped out. Quite the reverse. I think I'm almost inclined to go back and start a new company. I'm so excited about the future of this industry. But it'll have to be different to anything that I've run before. That's the point. We need people who've got the leadership to say, I've always done it this way. I love doing it this way, but it's no longer the way. Social media is a classic example. The business development issues that James was talking about, the candidate acquisition strategies, they need to evolve. It's not everything that we're throwing away. A lot of the age-old skills around the craft of recruitment need to make a comeback, actually. But there's a lot of things that have to be done differently, and that takes leadership. This whole conversation we had a few seconds ago about hiring people that are different to the model that we've hired in the past, that takes a paradigm shift, and it takes leadership. Most companies are stuck in a rut, and that is the danger facing most organizations. In Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, I've been there recently. Asia, I go there a lot. England, I've been there 4 times in the last 12 months, 18 months, say, talking to recruitment companies, and I see it all over the place.
Well, James, let me take that. Thank you, Greg. From that, Abtech has actually put in a question. Does that mean we think that a good recruitment leader then should always be at least just one step ahead of the team?
I think one step ahead of the market, actually, and everyone else, to be honest with you. I think, we have this conversation time and time again. What is the difference between management and leadership? Is there a difference, etc.? Management, to me, if you've got your recruitment organization structured properly and set up properly, then the business should manage people. Leadership is about, as Greg was saying, taking people on a journey, getting them excited about the vision of where you're trying to get to, focusing on strategy and that type of stuff. So a leader has to be a step ahead of their team, but has to be a step ahead of the markets to make sure that the strategy they're creating is something which is exciting from the team and is going to bring some form of results. And I think that's absolutely critical to this. I think one of the challenges we have, and I certainly see this in the recruitment sector in the UK. I spent some time in Australia working in recruitment in Australia. I saw it over there as well. Generally, what happens in a lot of recruitment organizations, we tend to promote the best biller or the top billers into the management role, not necessarily based on the fact that they're great leaders, but just based on by default the fact that they're the top billing people in the business. We then don't really give them any support or guidance to do that. We throw them in at the role. We find what can happen is that their billings drop off, they get disengaged, disenchanted with what's happening. We then put them on some remedial leadership development course. I hope that fixes the problem, but then it's a little bit too late, I think. So I think we need to really challenge about this top level of people within a recruitment business, whether it be the senior level or even that succession plan coming through, is we're looking for leadership traits, not management skills. And management should be managed by the process of the business. So if you look at something like, for example, performance management, we have a lot of conversations with people about how do I performance manage my staff. We're in a candidate short market. Should I performance manage my staff? Is it better to keep people who are underperforming slightly anyway? And that type of stuff. And then the whole performance management process becomes very much an emotive process between two human beings. We'll give them another shot because I like them. I think they're a good guy. I think they've got an opportunity. And then 6 months, 9 months later, they're still there, still underperforming. We have to ask the question why. If the processes were tightly set up, then the management part of the business would actually determine whether that person is still there or has gone into some form of remedial development work to get them back on billings and so on and so forth. And that's where leadership should be separated, I think, from the management piece. So yes, we should be one step ahead, absolutely, but I think a leader to me is looking 2, 3, we talked about this short-term, long-term sort of perspective. A good leader should be looking 2, 3 years down the track of what the business will become. And that's what they're taking people on that journey, engaging them on that journey towards. And I think it's really important to focus on that because even down to the recruitment piece, when I suggest to my clients that when you're recruiting new staff, recruit for what you will need in 2 years' time, not for what you need today or tomorrow necessarily.
Well, what we're really talking about, fellas, then is about business management. It's not about recruitment management. I mean, these are the same lessons. If I was running a footwear store, or if I was running a management consultancy, or if I'm running a pharmaceutical business, I mean, as a leader, I need to have those sorts of skills to be able to look ahead at the market, figure out where we need to be as a business. What change are we willing to invest in? But I think as a recruitment industry, we still get back into this little bubble that we're in. right lined up next to, car salesmen and real estate agents that were all about sales. It's all about the money. And the only reason anybody comes into recruitment is I need to make the money. So we haven't talked about consultant pay and bonus structures or performance management or rewards or, we haven't talked about all that stuff. And yet I thought that's why we all got in recruitment, isn't it? How does that work then?
Yeah, would you mind if I just jumped in and questioned that one before Greg, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Your comment about we're all in it for the money, right? It's a fascinating one, and again, I've explored attitudes and motivations of recruitment consultants for years. We've looked at different pay structures and commission structures and motivational schemes and bonus schemes and that type of stuff. And it's fascinating. And if you look at, we've done some research on this, and I don't know whether this is changing because of the types of people, the new millennials coming through, etc., and the different generations that are coming through. But we did some research at the back end of last year where we looked at, we surveyed and analysed about 1,300, 1,400 recruiters in the UK to identify what were their top motivators. And what we typically thought was going to come out was obviously salary, remuneration, etc., etc. And in the top 6 that came out, there were probably about 20 that came out, but the top 6 by quite a significant margin. Salary was in there, but the other 5 that were just as important as salary were things like interest in the work itself, achievement by myself and by my department, advancement and promotion, actual recognition for doing a good job and doing some good work, and the actual possibility of my job gaining some new challenges and keeping it quite interesting and engaged. The number one driver out of all those 6 things by quite some significant margin was actually this whole piece around about my personal achievement and my achievement as a team. None of that's money related. So fascinating enough, we have these concerns. A typical scenario could be it's Thursday afternoon and we haven't hit our sales targets yet, guys. What are we going to do? Right, let's do some power time and let's bang the phones and have a really good calling session, and I'll put £100 in an envelope, and whoever does the most calls or gets the most client meetings, I'll give them the £100 type scenario. And we often wonder, why does that not work, and why is it the same 1 or 2 consultants who always win that £100 and the others don't? And it's because actually I just don't think the majority of people these days are truly motivated by money. I think money is the reason why people come to work. But there is something different that motivates people to work hard when they get there. And that's what a leader has to tap into to really, really understand, I think.
Yeah, I can tell you, without having done the research, that it has never been the case that the best recruiters in this industry have ever been motivated solely by money. That has never, ever been the case. I can't put it as articulately as you, James, with the research, but it's typically been self-esteem, recognition, and being part of a winning team. And why that's so important to understand that is that one of the big mistakes I see is that there are leaders of recruitment companies who do think that money is the main motivator and try to fix all the evils in their company by offering people better salary. You will never fix a mediocre recruiter by offering them more money. You will never fix a dysfunctional company by paying the best. In fact, it'll send you broke faster because you'll pay too much and you won't build a company that has sustainability. We should at some point, if we have time, talk about salary packages, but frankly, I think that's not the least important thing, but it comes after you get the other things right. You've got to have the type of organization right, the structure right, and the type of business right. So for example, James touched on promoting recruiters, the best biller into the management role. I see that happening all the time to this day. It usually ends up with a double loss where the top billing recruiter starts billing less and people start leaving because he can't manage them properly and she's not a leader. That typically happens. But the other issues that are far more important is to build a company, and this is a leadership issue. You've got to build a company. Here's an important word. The most important obstacle to recruitment companies growing is a lack of accountability in those organizations. Hear me on this. That word, accountability. Organizations, and what does accountability mean? It means we build an organization where we do what we say we're going to do, and we do it in the time frame we said we were going to do it. Easy to say, extremely hard to achieve. And that accountability is a twin-edged sword. The recruiters and the staff are accountable, and the leader is accountable to deliver on the promise. And that is the missing element in so many companies. So first of all, we've got to get that right. And the second thing we've got to get right, I think, is that the leader has to be smart enough, or the owner, the business owner, I should say, has to be smart enough to know when they should move into a different role. One of the big things holding back companies is that the owner stays in a managing director role, for example. And they're not the best manager of people. And I've seen some smart people move aside and put themselves in another role. They're still the owner, they're still the real boss, but the person managing the recruiters is somebody different. For example, an owner should play to their strengths and bring in other people to fill the gap. And the other leadership issue that I see going wrong all the time, and I fear it's going to happen again as the market picks up, is that as companies grow again, they're going to promote team leaders and managers into non-billing roles. Everybody bills, baby. Everybody bills. Or everybody sells, let me say that. And so if you're a team leader of 2 people, well, you're probably billing a full desk and you're managing those people. If you're managing 8 to 10 people, well, maybe you're not billing very much. You're still handling a few roles, but you're account managing, you're rainmaking, you're out in front of customers. And if you're the CEO, you're still doing 50 client visits a year. Everybody sells. And what I've found, and we saw it in those big recruitment companies, many of whom have gone bust or have, are struggling to survive, is they had whole reams of people who were managing other whole reams of people, none of whom were billing. Everybody sells. Everybody's be customer focused. Everybody's got to have an accountability that we can measure. I'm not saying we run things micro or we run KPIs to the nth degree, but we've got to have accountability. So if there's anyone running a recruitment business listening to this, think about that. Are people accountable? Do people have measurables? And is there a system in your business where it's clear? This is something I see in many businesses. What is good in your business? Do we know what that means? What's great? What's acceptable? What's not acceptable? Often that's ill-defined. So that's both in terms of activity, quality of service, and results. So that's the first thing. Second thing is there has to be the willingness to have the difficult conversations. And there has to be consequences for non-compliance. And I know these sorts of words I'm using sound sort of autocratic. I don't mean that at all. The best companies I know blend what I describe as an environment of a iron fist in a velvet glove. So it's a great environment to work, but it's like playing for a great football team. It's tremendous to be on the team. We all love each other. We're successful. It's great. But if you don't perform, you will be dropped. And that's the kind of environment that's required for success in business, I imagine, but recruitment definitely.
Yeah, I mean, Greg, you touched on a really good point there about this accountability side of things. I think I can add another layer to that, which is also about the visibility side of things as well. If you think about, as you go up the sort of the food chain and the pyramid of leadership within a business, that the higher you are towards the top of the business, the more you're engaged you're going to be by the strategy and the vision, and there's probably something in it for you more as an end game and that type of stuff. So the question really becomes, is how do we get engagement from the people who are lower down that food chain, for want of a better word, within a recruitment organization? Because as a consultant, why should I work harder? Apart from I can earn some more money, if that's what it is that motivates me, but actually, why should I really, really push myself? So am I going to get equity in this or that type of stuff? I'm not. I'm just a consultant. You're the leader, you're the manager, so I can see why you're pushing more and asking me to go to that next level. But I don't get why I should be doing that necessarily. And that's a real interesting thing that we've got to tackle, is how we can get engagement at the lower level to the top level. And one of the things with that is, what we've got to do is this visibility piece is around about ensuring that everybody in your recruitment business truly understands where your business is going and what that journey absolutely looks like. So it's clearly articulated. So many consultants don't have a clue where their business structure and strategy actually is, and therefore they don't really know why they're doing what they're doing. So they end up just doing lots and lots of things for the sake of it, and that gets them through the day, as opposed to because they're creating something that, or I suppose their individual purpose is ultimately aligning to this company purpose and this vision. So I think it's so important for leaders in the recruitment business to create a clear vision for the business, but really articulate that across to everybody, and then identify how everybody has a role to play in achieving that vision and making that happen, and that creates far more levels of engagement, which I think is significantly important. But the other point that you touched on Greg, just on one point very quickly, was about about this sort of the measurables type of stuff. I think the other thing that I think we get slightly wrong, going back to the very first question, I think a lot of leaders are very good still at measuring activity levels and getting very hung up on activity levels, as opposed to what I think is far more important, which are the outcomes that those activity levels create, conversion ratios, results, and so on and so forth. I think we spend more time focusing on outcomes and giving our consultants more opportunity to be creative within that to achieve those outcomes, rather than holding their hands and micromanaging the day-to-day activities. I don't know, Greg, if you've got an opinion on that.
I have an opinion on a couple of things that you've said, and I will voice them because I think you've touched on some critical things there, James. And the first thing is, well, let me go to your second point, which was, no, the first point I should say. The question of people buying into the direction of the company. What I learned was, not only do you have to share with people the vision at some high level, you've got to also explain to them where their role fits into the business achieving that vision, and you've got to give them constant feedback. I made this mistake many times where I said, you know, I've been to your office and I've told you where we're going. You know, yeah, it was last year, but you know, don't you remember? And of course, it's not like that. You've got to keep repeating it, and you've got to take people into the tent, I like to say, and trust them and tell them how we're going against our goals. I used to share financial numbers, and I was never let down by people, you know, blabbing that outside the company. They felt it a privilege. They felt respected. And you need to explain to people, this is where we're going, this is why, and this is where your job fits. That's why your job is so important, and that's why you achieving your part of it is the piece of the puzzle that we need. And that is leadership. I'm not saying I was particularly good at it, but that is leadership, and that is how you get people to embrace the direction. So I completely agree with you, James, on that. It's a skill mostly lacking. Communication in recruitment companies is poor, maybe other companies as well. We tend to want to keep all the information to ourselves, and all people know is I've got to bill to keep my job and to make money. That is not the way to get your business to thrive. You have to bring people in to understand why their part is important, that they're part of a bigger thing. That takes very, very sophisticated communication skills and repeating the message continually. I don't remember your second point, James. What was the last thing that you said?
I'm not sure James is going to remember that now.
We'll move on.
I'll do a quick reset. We got about 7-8 minutes left to go. This is Alan Whitford with James, flabbergasted James Osborne from Elite Recruiters Network, and Mr. Greg Savage, also known as from the Savage Truth. And we're talking about Recruitment Reinvented, and I think we have been talking about how leaders are required to really change and transform what their business might be away from the more traditional, you know, 4 guys and a phone kind of recruitment business, and that's all they do. But we did subtitle this, maybe this was leading this for fun and money, and we've talked a little bit about the money bit, and we've also talked a little bit about, hey, it's got to be fun. And I guess one of the challenges, if I look at this and we look back at some of the topics we thought we would talk about here, is let me go wind it back a little bit more. If I'm the recruitment leader, presumably I've got an end game too. I'm not doing this just because I love helping people, which is why I got into recruitment. At least that's what I think I got into it. But I might want to think about an exit strategy. And I always think this is an interesting challenge at other events where we've had this conversation is, okay, you're a leader, you've done all this stuff, you transform your business, the numbers are looking good, you got some great people there, and now we're going to go evaluate your business and you're going to figure out what to do with it when you sell it. But at the same time, your biggest asset, those great billers and those great recruiters that you've hired, they could walk out the door at any moment and go start their own. So how do you manage that process when you're saying, as a leader, saying, hey, we're going to really build this business, we're going to go to an IPO, or we're going to do a trade sale, we're going to get more money, and as to your point, James, there is some reward for all of you all the way down the chain here, but please don't leave me and go set up in your own, because if you do, that's going to kill my sale.
Yeah, look, I mean...
Greg, you're going through it through those, yeah?
Well, let's first understand a couple of things. If anyone's listening to this and wants to sell their company, you need to understand, first of all, as I'm sure you do, that your business will, the starting point for evaluation is profit. You've got to make profit. And then you will get a multiple, I don't know, anywhere between 2 and 5 times maybe. But there's a number of considerations for evaluation, and that includes, past performance. But really what I'd like to remind people is that companies, when they might value it on last year's profit, but what they're buying really is future profits. And you've got to build into your business proof of sustainability. That's what people will pay for. And by sustainability, it's recurring revenue. And so they will look at your business mix. They will look at your mix of temp and perm. They'll look at the diversity of revenue streams, you know, that they come from, that you don't have. I mean, you can have a recruitment company of 8 people, of which 2 people do half the billings. I often see that. That company's worth virtually nothing. People won't buy it, not anymore. The frothy days they may have done, but not anymore. So you're really looking at building a company that you can point to future profits and the reliability of the earnings stream. And that brings us to your question, Alan. You know, people can walk out the door. Well, look, that's always been the case in our industry, and the way you're going to combat that is by building a great recruitment company where people want to work, and doing the things we touched, showing leadership. Yes, paying people fairly, clearly that's important, but people will not leave for 10 grand a year if they love what they do and they believe they're in the right place and they support it and they are offered development and growth opportunities and careers and communicated with and told the truth and all the things that we all would want from an employer. And that's really, there's no shortcuts to retaining people. You know, golden handcuffs and that doesn't work, because if they're not happy, they'll find a way to leave. You've got to build a company where people want to thrive. And that's probably a longer conversation than we've got today. James, what do you reckon?
Well, I feel like I'm agreeing with you too much today, Greg. This is not like me. But I think there's 2 things there. I think the first point about building the business for sort of the future potential, and that sort of determines its value. I think you're absolutely right. Again, a lot of recruitment leaders that we talk to in the very sort of early stages of our conversations, we talked about what is their exit strategy, or what does that look like potentially. And we put a number, we pluck a number out of the air and sort of a 3 or 4 year plan and that type of stuff. And it looks quite scary sometimes. Sometimes it's almost like a pipe dream. But there's actually a very good and very clear scientific sort of process or mathematical calculation that you can do to identify exactly how many customers you actually need to have in order to achieve the types of profitability and the types of performance that you want as a business. I'll be very happy to share that with anybody who's on this call today. But actually it simplifies the process, and when you break it down, you actually start realizing that it's not that difficult to create a high value recruitment business with a handful of people, providing that this spread of that risk is spread out over a number of customers and over a number of consultants. So if you do lose 1 or 2 people, which I'm sure inevitably you will do, that's okay. It won't damage the business. When you've got a business where you've got a team of 10 and 1 top biller and 9 underperforming people, that's when it gets a little bit painful, and that's when it becomes risky. With regards to how do you lock in people, which I suppose is what we're talking about here, you know, do we throw more money at them? Do we try and lock them in with equity and all these sort of share schemes and things like that? You know, yes, that's all good and well and good and that type of stuff. But again, it goes back to this whole thing. If people really want to be within your 4 doors of your business, if you truly are an employer of choice, then they'll stay, and they absolutely will stay. So, now, the first question, before you try and lock them in and try and almost like put a remedial band-aid on this, is actually say, what are we doing as an organization to be a true employer of choice in the marketplace? And I think that's a really important question a lot of recruitment companies don't ask. We try and band-aid it with sort of trying to stick things in there to try and lock them in. Let's actually think about why they might leave in the first place and make it a great place, which is agreeing, I suppose, with Greg, what he's saying on that.
Thanks very much for that, James. And I just want to put a shout out to Jonathan Hoyne out there, who is Jonathan Foyne, got your name wrong, who's had a couple of questions, and I think you guys answered them pretty effectively about where the leaders should be in the nuts and bolts, whether they should be doing the whole journey piece, and I think you've answered a lot of his questions. What I'd like to do, guys, is we're coming near to the end of our hour. Is just turn it around. I think we've had a great discussion. We could probably go on for another 2 or 3 hours, or in the sessions Greg has with you coming up, James, are probably going to be for 2 or 3 days, it's going to feel like. I'm going to ask you just that one final takeaway, if you could, that one final thought that you would say to someone who's running a recruitment business now and just says, hey, I need to step up. I need to really make that change. What would be that one thing you would say to them? This is what you got to go do. What do you say, James? You want to kick off on that one?
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing I would say to them is, well, I'll probably say 2 things actually. The first thing I would say is stop looking within the 4 walls of your business and look outside on what's actually happening. So break down the needs and the buyer profiles and the processes that are existing in the markets, in your candidates, with your clients, with the talent that you're trying to attract to your business, understand them, and embrace those communities rather than try and create something to take to a community that might not necessarily work. And the second piece, very simply, is create a strategy that is very clear, very succinct, and has been clearly articulated across the business. And then your role as a leader is to just take people on that journey, get them loving the journey, absolutely loving that journey.
Thank you very much, James. Greg, final thoughts from your side?
I would say to people, understand that no wave of economic recovery is going to save you if what you are selling is not what your customer wants. You've got to understand that really our battle is to build a recruitment company that has the methodology, the processes, the techniques, and the reach to access candidates, unique candidates, that our clients can't find. That is what they'll pay us for. And that means that if you're a recruitment company that relies on candidates proactively finding you, in other words, responding to ads and seeking you out, if that's your way of finding candidates, you will fail. You've got to build a company, you've got to build the skills in your organization to be able to find candidates as the skill shortages bite that your clients can't. And at a broader level, on the leadership issues that James has alluded to, it's building a company that has a longer-term view in terms of internal skills development. You can forget finding recruiters from rec to rec and all the rest of it. I mean, sure, try, but you're going to have to build your own, I believe, largely, and you need to retain them through building a culture of continuous learning. That's what keeps people engaged with your company, and accountability, and then the reward comes as a result of the results that come from that. You know, it's not money-led. Money is a result of great work, not the other way around. You don't pay people a lot and then they do great work. They do great work and then they make a lot. That is actually something that most people in this industry don't understand. And maybe it took me 20 years to understand it, but I understand it now. So the final thing I'd say is if you're in London or if you're in the UK, for goodness sake, 10th of September, 3 hours in the morning about management, 3 hours in the afternoon for your recruiters. It's as cheap as chips, probably about, I don't know, cost of a lunch. Get some people across there. James's website at Elite will tell you all the stuff, and I hope to see a lot of people there that day. I think we've got about 70 coming, but I'd really like another 100.
Now, who said that Greg wasn't a salesman? I'm not quite sure about that. See, there's still hope for some recruitment. Louis, over to you. We've hit our hour mark. It's been a great conversation, guys. I really appreciate you invested the time today. Louis, what are we doing in 2 weeks' time?
Thanks, guys. Yeah, really good hangout. In 2 weeks we've got Jeremy Roberts, who is the editor of and organizer of SourceCon. It's a fantastic event and a fantastic website. Lots of tips on sourcing. He's going to be joining us. He also has his own hangout, but he's going to be joining us to talk about sourcing strategy and tips. Hopefully showing us a few practical skills and a few practical tips. And that was on the 27th of August, 1 p.m. BST as normal. Also, we will be getting our notes from the Rec Hangout together on the UK Recruiter blog. Louise will be catching up on this hangout in her spare time, I suspect, and we'll be putting that together and getting all the top tips and advice from this hangout, and we'll push that out to everyone who's on the Rec Hangout mailing list, and you can sign up to that on the colleague blog. Thank you again, and we'll all see you next time, and do sign up for Greg's masterclass. Not worth missing. So take care all. Thanks very much. Thanks, Alan.
All right. Thanks very much, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye now.